Hi guys, it's me, Link, or Literal as you know from my channel. It has been so long since I've talked to you guys, but I'm finally back and yeah, I'm here to deliver you a deck profile for future card Buddyfight's Wizards. Just a disclaimer, the quality of this video and my microphone might not be the best. I don't really have a good setup and there's a lot of background noise right now. You might hear that during the video, but hopefully it's fine. Let's get to the deck profile. So, we run 4 copies of Center of the World Mary Sue. The first 3 monsters that I have laid out here in my deck are one of the most important monsters for this deck. So what Center of the World Mary Sue does is that when she enters the field by paying 2 gauge to call her, you can search your deck for one spell that can help you in any situations on a spell that you might need. The next card we run is the new Revival Buddy card, Center of the World Mary Sue Rebe, which is basically if you pay 2 gauge and there's a spell in your drop zone, you can call that card and that card becomes a size 0. And when it enters the field, once per turn, a hard once per turn ability, when it enters the field, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck and put the 2 spells from among them into your hand and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. It's pretty good. You're adding 2 spells into your hand instead of 1, but you are only checking the top 5 and not searching your entire deck for a specific one. The only problem is that you might miss spells, you might not get the right ones you need, but it's still pretty good, especially since it's a size 0 with double attack. One of the latest Revival Buddy cards that got revealed was Drago Wizard Keenest Axia, which we run a 3 of as well because it gives wizards the protection they needed to fight against other deck, which all wizards cannot be destroyed or returned to hand by your opponent's card effects. I'll only be going sorting through the effects that helps this deck and not the ones for the other deck that this card is also meant to be at. So when it enters the field, or when it attacks, you can deal 1 damage to your opponent or to yourself, and it's not once per turn. Normally you'd want to deal damage to your opponent instead of yourself, since that effect is mainly for the other deck that this card is associated with. And when you cast a spell, this card gets 15,000 power and double attack, which is really insane. Double attack with 17,000 power in total is really good and can break through walls, and overall just a really good card in general. Moving on, we have the one that gives pressure and aggressiveness to this deck, which is Resonating Bonds, Lee, and Dunkelheit. Basically by paying 1 gauge and putting the top card of your deck into their soul, it's a size 2 that becomes a size 0 if another size 2 or greater wizard is on the field, which is basically Mary Sue or the other monsters I have in this deck. So what it does is that at the start of your attack phase, if your drop zone has 6 or more different wizards, all wizards on your field for this turn gets 10,000 power, 1 critical, penetrate, and double attack, which is really good, giving everything inherent double attack, 10,000 power, 1 critical with penetrate, gives wizards the wonderful aggressiveness to push for the game, and overall makes it so that the deck can compete with a lot of defensive decks nowadays. So we run 2 copies of that. We run 1 copy of Shocking Magic Keenest Axia, hard once per turn ability, where if it's on the field and when you cast a spell, both the players in that game gets 2 gauge and you deal 1 damage to your opponent or to yourself, which basically an alternative way to win with this deck is that you can actually start burning your opponent until they have like 5 life or less, and you can just push for the game with the double attack swings using Lee and Dunkelheit with the other monsters. So we have 1 copy of that. Next is the monster engine for this deck. So we run 3 copies of Transmitter Dendo. What it does is that if you have 2 wizards on your field, you can discard Dendo from your hand, which is basically adding different wizards or a new wizard into your drop zone, so you get 2 gauge. Next is Sealed Magic Arts Zustine, a size 2, which can work with Resonating Bonds, Lee, and Dunkelheit. But basically, if you pay 1 life and you call it, you get 2 gauge. Simple as that. Next one is Absolute Girl of the Convent, Mary Sue, and Master Magician Suzuha. They basically do the same thing, whereas if you cast a spell, you draw a card. The only difference is that Suzuha checks if the top card of your deck is a spell, then you draw a card, whilst for Mary Sue, it doesn't need to check at all. Then the discard fodder for this deck is we run 1 copy of Battle Wizard the Ace and Battle Wizard the Straight. Basically, when they're discarded from your hand, you can pay 1 life. If you do, either you draw a card for Ace or you get 2 gauge from the Straight. That's all for the monsters, and now we move on to the only item and set spell we run in this deck. So we run one copy of Gunrod Hammerschmidt type CLA, which is basically a very cheap item which you can equip by paying 1 life, and then you rest it. You deal 1 damage to your opponent, and then you check and you mill the top 2 cards of your deck, and if any of them are monsters, you get a gauge, which is really good because this deck requires a lot of gauge to function. And then the set spell is Great Spell Circle of Deity Dragon. You're mainly going to use it for the second effect, is that at the start of your opponent's turn, you can discard a hand card. If you do, you can put up to 1 different spell from your drop zone into your hand. To the normal spell. So first we have the main point of this deck is that the wizard deck is known for casting the spell Great Spell My Grandfather Clock, which is basically a 2 gauge spell. If there are 6 or more different wizards in your drop zone, you can return all cards from your drop into your deck, shuffle your deck, and you get an extra turn. So basically it's all about recycling your deck, and then making sure you have drop zones into the making sure you have wizards in the drop zone so you can recycle it with Grandfather Clock. You get an extra turn, and you get aggressiveness using Lee and Dunkelheit. We run 2 copies of Future Card Buddyfight because this searches out Mary Sue, which is the original Mary Sue, which is also our buddy, and it gives an additional effect where once it's casted, you get 2 gauge, and at the start of your attack phase, if this card is in your buddy zone, the buddy on your field gets plus 2 critical. So basically, Mary Sue will have 4 critical essentially. We run 1 copy of Trio, basically just to recycle 1 monster from your drop zone that you might need in your hand to continue your cycle. So basically it either could be the Ace, or the Stray, or Dendo, or even Lee and Dunkelheit, Axia, or any of the Mary Sues. It can be diverse. Next we move on to the draw engine of the deck, which is basically 3 nice ones, 4 no pain no gain, 2 time sales, 2 Cronus Bounty Arc, and 2 Sephiroth's Lectures, and 1 Kosher. Nice one is a staple in every Magic World deck, which is basically as an essential pay 1 gauge and you draw 2 cards. Simple enough and helps you cycle through the deck. No Pain No Gain is a very good spell, which basically if you pay 2 gauge and draw 2 cards, you can discard a hand card, which is where the Ace and the Straight comes in, so you can activate their abilities with that. It also helps fill up your drop zone with wizards or spells by paying the gauge needed to cast the spell, or even the discard. Time Sale is another card similar to No Pain No Gain, except you pay 2 gauge and 2 life to just draw 2 cards. So it's basically nice one, but with a higher cost. But if you're at 3 life or less, you can cast it for free, and it also helps fill up your drop zone faster than Nice One. Cronus Bounty Arc is a pay 1 life to draw a card. Basically just another draw spell. There's nothing super special about it. It's just to help you cycle your deck and pay more life to maybe get the first effect of Time Sale. We run 2 copies of Sephiroth's Lectures because it's basically a staple in most Magic World decks, is that if you casted a spell this turn, you can cast it. It's a counter, so you can cast it on your turn or your opponent's turn. Check the top 2 cards of your deck, 1 goes to your hand and 1 goes to your gauge. It's easy enough because there's a lot of counter cards in this deck, or counter spells in this deck, and you're most likely always going to be casting spells on your turn anyway, so it works. We run 1 copy of Koshers because if there are 2 or more wizards on the field, you get a gauge and draw a card. It's simple enough. It's basically a Garcat. It's once per turn, which is sad, but what can you do? It's just basically another draw spell for the deck to function fully. Next, we run 1 copy of Nice Thunder, Recover Veil, and Key of Solomon's First Volume. You basically will use them all for the same reason, was that they all give 2 gauge. Key of Solomon's First Volume and Recover Veil are counter, so they can be casted and you can activate Sephiroth's Lectures, or Mary Sue, or Suzuha, or even Axia for them, even if it's your opponent's turn. Nice Thunder does have the ability, if that you have 4 life or less, you can draw 2 cards. Usually you would only use that ability if you already have your basic setup on your field. You use Grandfather Clock, and you basically don't need any more gauge for until the next turn. So that's another draw power. Recover Veil has an extra effect to make sure your hand cards cannot be dropped as long as you pay the life, and you also reduce the damage to 0, which you'll probably never use in this deck. And Key of Solomon's First Volume is just another spell with counter and gets 2 gauge. Now you may be wondering why I run a lot of different spells and then in weird ratios, and most of them being like 1-offs, is because I run Holy Magic, Which, if you don't know what holy magic is, it basically says if you cast it, you have to return 3 or more different spells from your drop zone to your deck and shuffle it. So basically spells with different card names. But it doesn't have to be 3. You can return any amount of different spells from your drop zone. But usually you would, in this deck, or literally in any deck, you would want to return at least 6 different spells so you can get 2 gauge, 2 life, and draw 2 cards. 9 is a bit much, but it's also a nice bonus if you do get that effect. And then for the defense spells, we run 1 copy of Sweet Happy Time. Sweet Happy Time is not really more of defense, it's more of just like protection, because Keenest Axia does give the destruction and bounce protection to wizards, but it does not give ability nullification protection. That's a mouthful. So we run Sweet Happy Time for that. It also prevents your monsters from getting rest, and it also makes your opponent's monsters get minus 10,000 defense, which in case you can't break through walls or something. So it helps you in a lot of situations, and we run a 1 off of that card. Well, the main defense spell for Wizard is Great Spell, Special, Elegant, Amazing Wall. It is a really good spell. You can cast it as long as you have 6 or more wizards in the drop zone. It doesn't have to be different, as long as you just have 6 wizards. Even if they have different copies, you may cast it. It's 3 gauge, and for that turn, you cannot take damage, and your cards cannot be destroyed. So basically, you're protecting your board and yourself at the same time. So that is it for the deck profile. If I want to explain some bit of combos, I already said no pain, no gain. You discard ace or the ace or the straight to get their effects off. These counter spell cards to activate Sephiroth's Lectures, Mary Sue, and Suzuha and Axia. Another thing to note about this deck, to really make sure that what you're doing your things correctly. Like, you might, like when you hit 6 different wizards in the drop zone and you still have more draw power, you might want to cast Grandfather Clock first if you already have that to get that second turn. So then you can keep cycling your deck in the same turn and then get another 6 different wizards in your drop zone to activate Lee and Dooglad's ability. Because as you know, Grandfather Clock returns all cards from your drop zone to your deck, so that would mean no cards are in your drop zone except for Grandfather Clock once the spell has resolved. So yeah, you just have to be wary of what you're doing, make sure you have a game plan when you're looking at your hand cards, and just, yeah, have fun with this deck. I really think this deck is a really fun deck, even though it's basically solitaire in Buddyfight, and you're kind of like making your opponent suffer with it. It's a really fun deck, and it's kind of not fun to fight against. It's one of those cases, but yeah. I enjoyed this deck, and I hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile. I'm sorry for the background noise, I apologize, and the quality of this video, as well as my microphone, they're not the best, but yeah, I've been Literal Icicle, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!